What is a flood insurance deductible and what are you really going to pay? That's what I'm going to cover in today's video for you. So let's get started. But before we do, I need you to share, subscribe, and like the channel below. Hi, I'm Chris with the Flood Insurance Guru. And more than a decade ago, I bought a house in a flood zone and I almost lost that house because of high flood insurance premiums. I thought things like deductibles were going to have a big impact, you see, because when I changed the deductible on my auto insurance, it saves me a lot of money. So in today's video, I'm actually talking about what is a flood insurance deductible? What are you really going to pay? Or what is the insurance really going to pay? So let's talk about that. So think about this, risk versus reward. How much are you willing to risk? And when we think about how we're risking things, we're talking about the deductible. How much are you willing to pay out of your pocket before insurance pays? This is what's called a deductible. Now on flood insurance deductible, it works a little bit different maybe than auto insurance or home insurance. Maybe you get a check or you've got to pay on your policy under deductible, then they're gonna give it to you. It works a little bit different on flood. See, typically on flood, whatever the damages are, they're typically taking the deductible out of that amount. Not always, but this is typically the case with a flood insurance deductible. Now, when it comes to understanding your deductible, on flood insurance, you want to pay attention to what's called your coverage pages, your declarations page. You want to look at, first of all, your National Flood Insurance Program policy. Let's talk about that one. You typically are going to have two deductibles there. You're going to have a building deductible and you're going to have a contents deductible if you've got contents. So if you decide to do a $5,000 deductible, this means you could really have a $10,000 deductible. So you want to be careful here because you only save about 2.5% on a flood policy going from $1,000 deductible to $5,000. So how much could your deductible really impact your flood insurance premiums? I'm glad you asked. Let's take a look at this with one of these private companies that we use a lot. And I'm not going to disclose who the company is because the purpose of this is for you just to see how private flood insurance is so different than the National Flood Insurance Program. Remember, the National Flood Insurance Program, typically your deductible is going to save you about 2.5%. So let's just say that we had this quote right here. Probably going to save us like $10 going from 1,000 to 5,000, right? We're at 1,000, 1,039. We're at 5,000. 559, 2,500. That's interesting, isn't it? That we have $1,000 deductible here. Look, so we're saving right here, saving about $14, going from 1,000 to 2,000, right? However, 5,000, that's a big savings there. It's almost, $500. Kind of crazy there, isn't it? Look, the coverage amount is changing a little bit by about $25,000, but going to a higher deductible here, is not always going to be the best plan. All these tiers are built differently, but I want to really just show you for 250. Heck, let's go right here to 299,000 for deluxe. It's 1,091, right? But you're only getting $50,000 more in coverage and you're paying twice as much. That's kind of crazy when you look at dollar amount per coverage. Now let's look at a $5,000 deductible. At the same 1,058, right? So we're saving $40 a year, which is what we said on average many times with these deductibles. So you're taking on $4,000 more on a deductible, but you're only saving $40 a year. That means over the course of 100 years is what it's going to take to make up the deductible. So when you're picking your deductible on your flood insurance, I want you to remember this. Now, on private flood insurance, you potentially could have 3 deductibles. You're going to have your building deductible, your contents deductible, and you could have your additional living expenses deductible. So that's 3 different deductibles. Now, what you want to be careful with too, though, is that additional living expenses might also have an additional wait period. You want to work with a flood insurance agent that's very knowledgeable on flood to understand this. So this is how these deductibles work. As I mentioned, completely different than something like a home insurance deductible where you may just pay one deductible, and that's it. And these are the tricky things about flood insurance deductibles. But this is what you're really going to pay out of pocket. Now, pay attention to one of our next videos though, where we talk about actual cash value versus replacement cost and what the insurance company will really pay on your flood insurance claim. I'm Chris with the Flood Insurance Guru, and I look forward to speaking to you at our next video. Remember, share, subscribe, and like the channel below. Thank you.